I'm John Razimus, also known as John Houston. In the year 2011, I experienced extreme poltergeist activity for about 6 months straight in one house. But this event was preceded by a previous house in the year 2010. There were 2 houses before the poltergeist house, and there was one house after the poltergeist house where I also experienced some crazy things. I named each of these houses for the different events that took place in them. I thank you for watching. The Crossroads, the Vortex, the Gates, the Depths. These are all houses I had extreme paranormal experiences in. The following is a true story that actually happened to me. I moved to Santa Maria, California in the year 2009, and I left at the very end of January of 2012. Around February 14th, 2010 was the very beginning of these paranormal supernatural events. This is the neighborhood of the Gates of Hell, the worst house of all of them. I did a drive-by because even standing on the sidewalk was freaky. It was a freaky environment, very freaky setting, so I'm just going to drive past it. Here it is, right here. The Gates of Hell. Right there. It looks pretty ordinary on the outside, but living there for 6 months, the poltergeist moved objects on a daily basis for 6 months straight. It becomes overwhelming to the point where I want to document what happened. Before we talk about the gates a little bit more, let's go back to November 1st, 2010. I already talked about the swarm of locusts that sounded like they sounded like insects, but they also sounded like demons. I didn't describe the atmosphere. It wasn't just insects, okay? I felt a spiritual, ominous presence of these things. They were invisible, but I couldn't sleep because of them. They were that bad. And I had a sense that every single was coming from an individual demon. I had a feeling there were 1,000 demons in my room swarming around me, like a vulture swarms around its prey, or swarms around a dead animal. I was the victim. I was the dead animal. I was the whatever. I was the target. And it seemed like these things were almost fighting over who gets to have me. That's the feeling and setting I had at the Vortex, just to give a little more perspective on how intense that swarm of locusts sound was. It did go away, and that did take place on November 1st, 2010. I lived in the Vortex from the beginning of March 2010 to the end of May 2011, so a little over a year. In June of 2011, I moved in to the Gates. The Gates seemed nice at first. To be honest, the first 3 weeks, the first month, I didn't experience anything out of the ordinary. It had its own patio. It had its own bathroom. I was living in the master suite, and it was pretty good setup. despite the fact that there were little angels and crosses on the wall, I would say this house, the Gates of Hell, had more cross and Christian and just religious memorabilia, knickknacks, than any of the other houses, yet was the worst. After about 3 weeks to a month, the activity started, and it started pretty abruptly. It wasn't like small. It started as big as it ended, except for the one attack, which was in between. I was attacked by the Poltergeist about midway through my stay from January 2011 to May or June 2011. This is how the activity started. I would come home from work. I got off at work around 5 to 6 p.m. I would get home from work. I would either go to Taco Bell and get a burrito, or I would cook up some ramen. The lady who owns the place said I was free to use the television, but whenever I did use the television, I would get dirty looks. So I decided 99% of the time to stay in my room, and I would just turn on the internet, and this is when Hulu was fairly new. I was watching shows on Hulu, watching movies on Hulu, just kicking back, drinking a soda, drinking a water, eating some ramen, eating a burrito from Taco Bell, normal stuff like that. And objects would fly off the shelves with the light on, even as early as 6 p.m., with the sun still shining light through the windows. And the type of objects that would fall were bottles, small objects, small boxes, small decorations. It seemed to have a limit of how much it could move, like it had a restraint. It's clearly invisible and from another dimension, but it had the ability to manipulate objects in my room. It wasn't me manipulating these objects. I've read a few books mentioning psychokinesis, telekinesis, moving objects with your mind. And coming from someone who witnessed firsthand poltergeist activity for almost 6 months, I am 100% of the opinion that it's an external, intelligent entity in a dimension that is parallel to our dimension. We are in the 3rd/4th dimension, and a poltergeist is an entity that is in my estimation, the 5th dimension, and they can reach through into our dimension enough to move objects, but not enough for us to see them. They're still in their dimension, but they're like halfway into our dimension, enough to be able to move objects. And so this creature, it got on top of me and attacked me one time. I'll talk about that in this video near the end. I estimate the size was the size of a small child or a large monkey. That's pretty much the size of this entity, based on it jumping on me and attacking me. The objects it moved, we're talking 10 objects every single night, easily, sometimes 20. It knew I was there. It was annoying me. It was harassing me on purpose. It would knock over objects. It would bang things, knock over objects. It would sit on pillows, and I could see the impression go down, and then the pillow would puff back up. See, at the time, I was collecting a few chairs, mid-century chairs, and I still have them, and I was trying to make pillows for these chairs, so I collected a few foam pillows. I still, to this day, have not covered these pillows. I should do this, but I had a couple boxes, and I had a couple foam pillows on top of those boxes. This entity, as I was walking over to the door to make sure my door was locked, because I didn't trust my landlady. She was creepy, to say the least. I walked over to the door to see if it's locked, and the entity sat down on my pillows, depressed them, pushed them down. The pillows popped up, and then they were pushed down again, and then they popped up again. The depression was at least 2 inches down. The actual impression looked like that of a butt, a bum, just pushing down. Invisible entity pushing down the pillow. It sat on my pillows. That was the first time I ever saw up close. I was literally 1 foot away when it sat down. It almost was like playing with my pillows, like curious on what a pillow was. But I think it well knew what a pillow was. It was just using it to freak me out. After it sat down twice, I touched the pillows myself, and I was like, what the heck? At this point, I already knew he was a poltergeist, and I did not communicate with this poltergeist except for a very few times. After it sat down on the pillow, I said to it, you know what? If I was an invisible ghost-like creature and I could wander the entire planet Earth, I wouldn't choose to just hang out in this one room. I would fly across the universe or fly across the world. And the entity responded with no words, just with knocking over a few objects, just like... And I believe its reaction meant that it had no choice. It was assigned to harass me in that room. It was its exclusive job to do that. And I personally believe this entity was under the command of the high-ranking demon of Santa Maria, which I met a year prior, around Valentine's Day of 2010. Over a year later, this high-ranking demon assigned a poltergeist to haunt me for 6 months. This is pretty messed up. It goes into the realm of, actually the Bible talks about, and I only really thought about this on a greater level when I went to work and started telling a few selective coworkers. I told around 5 coworkers at work. And out of the 5, I think 1, maybe 2 believed me. But the one that really believed me told me that the Bible talks about principalities, that the devil has power over principalities. I never understood that verse in the Bible, never gave it a second thought. Looked up the word principality. Principality is a piece of land owned by a prince. And so, we have a duchy owned by a duke. We have a baron owning this piece of land. We have a mayor assigned to this piece of land. We have a prince assigned to a big piece of land. We have a kingdom for a king assigned to a giant piece of land. And this is how I believe the devil and his minions work. They are actually assigned to pieces of land. Independent of that, there are familiars that are assigned to human beings. But I'm going to focus on principalities because I was in a location haunted by a poltergeist for 6 months. Now, perhaps that poltergeist was there before I got there. Perhaps it's still there even long after I left. This was 5 years ago. I did tell the guy moving in. I stopped by to try to get my deposit, and the lady who runs this, can't even say a rental because she has zero concept of the renting laws in California. She broke as many of them as she possibly could, and she tried to steal my deposit. She was such a shady person, in my opinion, but the fact that she's the owner of the gates of hell just tells you how great of a person she probably is. Now, maybe she is a great person. Maybe she turned sour somewhere along the line. I have zero reason to cover up the addresses of these houses, and I'll tell you why. Because they happened in these houses. I don't recommend you go to these houses and bother the people who own them, but this is part of the history of my life. I'm not going to pick a random house. I asked the current tenant of my old master room in that house, the same poltergeist room, I said, hey, have you experienced any strange activity? He's like, what? I said, have you experienced anything strange, paranormal, ghosts, anything? He's like, huh? I'm like, have you experienced any poltergeist activity of objects moving in that room? He's like, no, man, I don't know. So it brings me to the conclusion that this demon was personally assigned to me from that high-ranking demon, and this location was very just a perfect conduit, a perfect vortex where this entity could manifest moving objects and bothering me. Or I'm simply a highly spiritually sensitive person that can sense entities to the point where they are attracted and want to make their presence known to me. I was in no way, shape, or form in any desire wanting to communicate, talk to, or form any relationship with this entity. I didn't give it a name, never will. It was just a wild animal type personality, like a monkey, like a dog. That was the personality. It played with things in my room, such as my luggage. It knocked over boxes in my closet. It pulled down a green screen that I set up. I really wanted to do Hoax Hunter episodes. This channel is youtube.com/hoaxhunter, and I used to focus specifically on busting hoaxes. But ever since crazy things like this happened, I changed my tune. People thought I was an atheist when I was busting hoaxes. And people probably think I'm trying to push some agenda or push some religion down their throat with these stories, but I'm not. Believe whatever religion you want to believe. Don't believe any religion you don't want to believe in. These videos have no agenda. They're simply a document of what happened in my life. The only video I made while living in this poltergeist house was published on October 5th, 2011. I used the green screen that was pulled down by the poltergeist, and you gotta understand, it wasn't gravity, it wasn't a weak tack. I had the giant tacks, the oversized huge tacks, and I used tape. We're talking multiple tacks, a lot of tape, and this entity pulled down my green screen 3 times. We're talking 3 days in a row. And so it wasn't the best environment to make videos. If I was running a ghost hunter or demon occult themed channel, I might have been more inclined to film the entity. But even after making this Hoax Hunter Coming Soon video, I didn't have much desire. All the energy was drained out of me. I've mentioned this before, but I bought a huge fan and I put it on maximum. I bought a second pillow and put it over my ear. Even with a pillow over my ear and my fan at maximum, and I still have this fan to this day, it's a very loud fan on maximum. I could still hear the poltergeist harassing me all night long. It would almost wait until I turned out the light and tried to go to sleep to be extra loud and knock over additional items. It's amazing how the human mind can cope with an entity such as a poltergeist, because on week 1, I couldn't sleep. Week 2, I could barely sleep. Week 3, I was telling it to pay rent. And month 5, I was so used to it, I didn't even flinch. I didn't even give it a second thought. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. I communicated with it minimally, but I taunted it a little bit, and I shouldn't have. I made fun of it a couple times. I said stuff like, oh, you can only move that? Who gives a crap if you can move that tiny cup over there? My pinky is stronger than that. I would say stuff like that. And one time I said, your power is about as strong as one flick of my finger. One flick. Flick. And I think it took that insult very personally. Anyway, I'm going to show the video that I made while in this poltergeist room. I didn't make any Hoax Hunter videos. People have asked me, why didn't you try to film it? I owned a cheap Sony camcorder that records for about maybe 30 minutes before it dies. I didn't have any sophisticated equipment. I didn't have any sophisticated SD card that would go longer than 30 minutes. And this thing didn't take commands. It wouldn't knock over something based on me asking it to, and I never did ask. But I didn't want to get in the relationship that, let's say, a black magic practitioner has with a familiar that will perform tricks and stunts, or let's say an evil magician on stage has with an invisible entity, demon, that levitates a ball for the performance, for the audience, for the claps and the cheers. And they have that contract with each other. And at the end, when they die, who knows? What, do they become a slave to that imp demon? I didn't want to get into any shady territory of any contracts, and communicating is the first step of that contract. Communicating is the first step of delving into a world you can't get out of. So if you are haunted by poltergeist, I highly do not recommend communication. And I considered filming it communication. And I knew what would happen if I did try to film it for 5 months straight. I knew what would happen. I would get 1 bottle of water knocked over, and I would get 100 views, and I would get 10 thumbs down, and I would get a comment that said, "That is so easily fakeable." And I couldn't disagree. It would have been easily fakeable because I already thought about all those things. I weighed out the pros with the cons. I didn't want to film it, but I did film this video, and I spun the chair a good 4 times until the chair lined up perfect, or at least pretty good. I can't prove it, and it's stupid to even talk about it, I guess, but it's possible the entity perhaps lined up the chair for this video. All I can say is I spun it 4 times, and it always ended up sideways or backwards. And one time, this last time, it lined up pretty good. And it was close to the area where it pushed down those pillows. As a matter of fact, this entity had a favorite corner of the room. Its favorite corner was where I originally had the green screen. But it wasn't limited to the corner. It just seems it entered the room from the corner and really dominated the corner. And whenever I would put items in that particular corner, those items would be constantly played with. And so I eventually moved all my stuff from that corner until it was an empty corner. So I tried my best to not bother it, but it went out of its way to bother me. Now here is the one video I did post on October 5th, 2011, while I was living in this poltergeist house. This video has already surpassed 20 minutes. It's longer than I wanted it to be, so I will be including in part 3 the 4th house, the depths. I considered calling the depths something else, such as the bowels, or something like that, because of a pungent odor that I smelled in that house. So stay tuned for the next part of this series. Where is the attack where the entity jumped on me? Well, you know what? I ordered the soundtrack for the movie that I watched on Hulu right before the entity attacked me. And I'm going to sit down and show the record and show that it is actually a different movie than I thought it was. The movie that I watched right before the entity attacked me in the poltergeist house, I originally said it was something else, but upon recalling what it was and looking it up and actually looking for it, I realized I misquoted the name of the movie. The actual movie I watched 15 minutes of before I was attacked by the poltergeist was called From Beyond. It's an 80s horror movie, and it involves an invisible world, and I believe the entity just thought it was a good time to freak me out. The entity thought I was scared by the movie, but it was around 10 p.m., and I had to work the next day. And with a poltergeist haunting you every night, I planned for needing this many hours to go to sleep. And it knew this. And this entity tried to get me to lose my job, tried to cause me to sleep in from lack of sleep. It did cause me to be late one time by about an hour, but that's the worst job-wise damage that it did to me. So From Beyond, it is an H.P. Lovecraft story, and this movie is inspired by that. I have watched the entire movie since then. It's a very freaky movie, and I can see why the entity enjoyed the movie. I'm gonna, in great detail, talk about the attack in the next video, and perhaps that video will also contain the depths, or maybe I'll separate that into a fourth video. I apologize for making this so long, but I want it to be in depth, in detail as much as possible. There are things I'm skipping and I'm leaving out because of time restraints. I thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next part in this story, which is 100% true. This has been John Razimus with Pyramidikal. Be seeing you.
Subscribe.